Good morning, or good whatever time of day it is as you listen to this. If it's Saturday morning, Ian and I are on a road trip, driving to Goderich to drop off a birthday present for our son-in-law and an advent calendar and some goodies for the family. It will be a brief, masked and distanced visit, but we are excited to say hello to our grandkids and their parents. It will also be the longest drive we've had since mid-March. Today's gospel reading is a short parable from Luke, chapter 18. It's called the Parable of the Pharisee and the Tax Collector. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. This is the gospel of Christ. Does this remind you of anything you've heard recently? Just a few chapters earlier, Luke recounts another parable in which Jesus warns people not to sit in the place of honor at a wedding banquet, in case somebody more distinguished arrives and you are then forced to take a lower place. That story ended almost with the same words as this one: for all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Graham talked about this in the Good News 2 weeks ago, and he described that tricky situation of finding yourself feeling proud about feeling humble. In today's parable, too, the issue is pride versus humility, the arrogance of the self-satisfied Pharisee versus the humility of the tax collector. And the gospel says that Jesus tells this parable to some who trusted that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. I suppose that means people like the Pharisee who looked down on the humble tax collector. But it equally could apply to me. I know there have been many times when I felt self-satisfied, like that Pharisee, and felt superior to someone else. Even reading the parable, I'm tempted to look at the Pharisee with contempt, and thus to be like him. And there have also been times when I felt like the tax collector, worthless. But to focus on worthlessness can be another way of being self-absorbed, so maybe that's not ideal either. A book I'm reading called Everyday Holiness talks about humility not as the extreme opposite of pride, but rather as a balanced, moderate, accurate understanding of yourself that you act on in your life. So here's a story about one time that I briefly glimpsed that kind of understanding about myself. Years ago, a friend who went to Knox United Church invited me to go to a study group there. There were some excellent discussions, and I was anxious to make a good impression as a visiting Anglican. In other words, I was trying to sound clever. One of the participants was a woman who lived on disability benefits and had a past history of mental health problems. I certainly felt sorry for her situation, but if I'm honest, I was also conscious of my advantage in education. but the surprise was how much she taught me. She had an amazing faith and such gratitude for the improved health that she now had and the contributions that she could now make to the community. On the last evening, we went as a group to walk the labyrinth at Georgian Shores United Church. And I followed the labyrinth path behind this woman. And suddenly I was overwhelmed with the realization that this was the right order. She was the one who had been an example for me. She was the leader, and I was the follower. And that felt exactly right to me. There was no sense of competition or needing to be better. I was at peace with myself. I still struggle with pride and self-absorption. It's a work in progress for sure. But I'm glad that today's gospel helped me to remember that moment in the labyrinth and the joy that came with realizing someone else's worth. I'd like to close with a few passages from Joan Chittister's book, Aspects of the Heart, from the chapter called A Humble Heart. At the end of the day, we discover that humility, the strength to separate our sense of the meaning of life from what we do, is the only real answer to lifelong happiness. Humility is the height of inner freedom. It is in thrall to no one and nothing, not even its own self-image. Only the humble are truly happy. There is nothing they have that anyone can take from them, and all that they have, whatever it is, they enjoy for its own sake. So humility as a source of happiness, true happiness, sounds like something to aspire to. I hope you're all safe and well despite this scary second wave of COVID-19. And please come back on Monday for more good news with Carol.